Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of taking it slow, looking at tracks that are on the slower side, whether that's tempo or pacing or just time feel. Today we're going to be looking at something from The Frames. The track is A Caution to the Birds. Let's dive in, see what The Frames have in store for us today. Yeah, 10 seconds in, this certainly fits for the theme.
The body's not secure. And the truth will not absorb. And this crumbling apart. It's no good for you at all. Sound that you don't know. Sound that you with eyes that never look past this moment underfoot. And this reading
Like something catching up to you?
is a caution to the birds. Sound that you don't know. Sound that you don't.
A little violin back there? Yeah, the same guitar melody from the last post-chorus. This is the first time I really feel like the song has taken off. So much of it just felt rather relatively grounded. All right. This track is fairly high contrast. We have the moodier, slower section and the more energetic chorus that contrasts that. It is similar-ish in emotional nature. I'd say both of them are fairly dreary, although I don't know, the first one kind of comes off as more melancholic. The second one is weight. Maybe a pressure of that melancholy. I don't know, the chord progression is slightly different though, and I think having the violin in there also kind of elevates it because it's a warm tone, but higher in pitch too. Something that the electric guitar in the final section of this track, as it came in, sort of carried on and continued through as another higher pitched instrument here, though this one a little less warm. These two, though, feel like they're two sides of the same coin, exploring the same concept through, I don't know, perplexity, seeing how we can navigate one emotion, but the duality of it. Again, I feel like maybe we have the dreariness of melancholy, the emptiness and the slowness versus the pressure of grief. And they're very much interlinked, but two very different things. On the topic of contrast, I've brought up speed a couple of times. This is an interesting thing to me. When I check the tempo of our verse, about 53 beats per minute. One of the slower ones that we've had this week, but still well within the same framing. 50 to 65 or so has definitely been the time signature or the tempo that we've explored this week, just completely coincidentally. But what I find interesting is that the chorus feels pretty quick. Part of this is that we have shifted from the drums being incredibly sparse. We have the snare on, I don't remember if it was 1 and 3 or 2 and 4, but it was alternating beats, and that leaves a big gap in between each hit. And that can certainly make time feel like it gets stretched out, especially in those places where the snare doesn't accent and we're left with 3 beats of near emptiness. But the other thing is that in the faster section, the drummer is giving us eighth note hi-hat hits. There is more drumming happening, twice as much drumming happening. It feels like we've entered into something faster, but do any of you feel like we entered into double time, or did you think that the chorus was still on the slower side? For me, the way I felt it was still a bit slower, but it picked up. So I went and checked, and sure enough, if I followed what the drums are doing here, I end up with 115 beats per minute. We cut that down in half and we end up at 57-ish or so. So we moved up from 53 to 57. That's a very small amount. 4 beats per minute is really not a big change, not one you can typically feel, but here you do. Part of it is the filling in of space, making it feel faster by putting more things in, but we also have technically increased the tempo. This is something that I've brought up a few times in the past, particularly in poppier music. I feel is where it happens quite frequently, especially moving from a verse into a chorus. You're going to want more energy in that chorus. That's the part that you want to be the hook. Not in this particularly, but pop music more in general. And so just a little kick, 3 to 6 BPM, something like that. Not one that's typically felt or heard maybe, but one that is felt. You can feel that energy even if you don't know where it came from. And that's what happens here. I think that was used to great effect. But it's also disguised by more happening too. It's one of the best ways to implement it is to hide it masterfully within the music. Before we dive into the lyrics, I do want to bring up some of the instrumentation in here. The verse, there's just not much to discuss here. It is fairly empty. It is a sparse section, very slow moving work on every instrument, the drums, the guitar, the bass, the vocals. There's just not a lot happening. But there are these sounds. I don't feedback, maybe just a pitch from a keyboard or something. Oftentimes I would hear it starting off on the right, kind of quiet, fade in, grow in volume, but also move across as well. Not all the way to the other speaker, but certainly coming at me and then dissipating. I found this to be really interesting. I had mentioned in the reaction something about feeling chased and something catching up to me or something like that. I think it fits with the moodiness of something that barely moves at all, that feels lethargic. The verse is a dragging of the feet. This has momentum. I don't know if it's trying to find me or trying to pull the song forward, trying to use its own momentum to speed the track up, but it is definitely some sort of parallel temporal thing, something to juxtapose the lack of speed throughout most of this verse. We don't hear this sound at all in the chorus. That's not to say, again, that the chorus is brisk, but it feels like it's picked the pace up a little bit. In the chorus, though, we have more things happening. In a sense, this is very full. It's not spacious anymore. This is why this section feels more like a crushing weight to me when paired with the chords being played. But there's just more of everything. It's the exact opposite of the sparseness, the drum part. Like I mentioned, even just on the basis of the hi-hat, we're making 2 hits every beat rather than 1 hit every 2 beats. That is a drastic improvement in perceived feeling of time. But the drums are also playing many things. The snare, the bass kick, they're all part of this. It isn't 1 hit per beat and then we wait a long time and we'll hit a different part of the kit. There's a consistent pattern being played here where parts of the kit are played together. We also have the guitar and bass, lots of chordal work going on here. They're building out the emotion, the atmosphere. This is paired well with a violin and I think maybe a synthesizer in there. It just feels fuller than 1 guitar and 1 bass, but I couldn't pinpoint any specific timbre that would be contributing to this. So it could just be double tracked guitars as well. But again, the melodies they're playing, they're not too moving. There is still this lethargy. We don't have an element of melody really present in the instrumentation here. They're larger, they're louder, they take up more space, they're more present, there's less pauses, but it's still just foundational work from these two. And that brings us to the vocals, who are kind of carrying on the torch from their verse idea, sparsely laid out, lacking of energy in the vocal delivery, melody lines. Very straightforward stuff. The violin does do well at extracting a sappiness almost. There's a melodramatic melancholy to this. Despite the weight, there is still this feeling of sorrow that permeates this. And I think a lot of it comes through in that melodic line that eventually gets picked up by the electric guitar later. There is the electric guitar line, I think it's electric, in the post chorus that is, again, very sparse. It kind of takes us from a little bit more of that driven idea in the chorus and slows us down to pull us back into the sparser, emptier verse. And I think it does a pretty good job, as temporally we've already dropped the tempo back down those 4 BPM, and most of the instruments are playing sparsely. This instrument, though, starts with more notes and slowly reduces the number of notes that it plays at a time until it disappears entirely and we're back to the verse. So while most of the instrumentation is light switch, it's on and then it's off. We're in the chorus and then we're back in the verse. This is a bit more of a smoother transition from the composition techniques of one section to the next. And that's about all I have to say about this track. It is compositionally simple. It is emotionally not completely straightforward, but it is, not complex either. We've already touched on that. I think it is an evocative song. It is artistically and thematically strong. It just doesn't have the depth where I would be talking about this for, 20 or 25 minutes. So let's dive into some lyrics and see what the frames are singing about here. And equally so, there's not much to the lyrics. Each verse is 4 lines long. Felt like a lot longer, but again, sparse use of pretty much everything in here leads to a sparse amount of words in an elongated amount of time. So we have 4 lines each, and then a 2-line chorus that is used both times it's present, and then that's it. I'll be completely honest, I did not grab this right away. I kind of saw some threads, but I wasn't sure what it was talking about. The annotation underneath the track, underneath the lyrics on genius.com really helped put it into some perspective that is going to fuel most of this discussion right here. It says, the body is not secure. The truth will not absorb, and this crumbling apart is no good for you at all. Well, right off the bat, someone's crumbling apart, figuratively, most likely. That I can understand, and that's usually not good. A mental or emotional deterioration is, that's just bad mental health. Or I should say poor mental health. And no, that's never good. The second stanza says, with eyes that never look past the time underfoot. And this reading in the cards is a caution to the birds. Now, I'm not too sure about the idiom, a caution to the birds. I probably should have looked that up. I may pause real quick and look that up. But the idea here that I picked up was that a person never looks beyond the here and the now. But I couldn't figure out what the reading in the cards were or how any of this pertained to a crumbling mental state. And the chorus gives me no information. It says there's order in the sound that you don't know. That's it. What does that mean? So I have some threads to pull at here, but ultimately I don't think I would have had much else to say about this without this additional information. The person describes this as the fragility of human life, and how, in order to live in a sane way, we put the thoughts of our own mortality out of our minds. To focus on the here and now and try not to worry too much about what comes next. Maybe not necessarily a literal the present, but simply this state of being. To not wonder where you were before or where you will go after you leave this plane. That can certainly drive someone into a spiral. But to focus on living and how that makes living easier in an interesting kind of way. They did describe, though, that there's order in the sound, that sound is being thoughts, other thoughts, particularly of what it means to not exist. It says that we can drown in them. Now, I'm still not entirely sure what the chorus is saying, but I got like 60% of it. It's the sound that we don't know, the thoughts that we try to avoid as we think about death and how that can send us into a spiral, that there is an order to it all. The cycle of life, the idea of non-existence in general, there is a cosmic order to all of this. But it's sort of, for most people, me included, a little bit beyond our mortal minds. And I think that's what's trying to be alluded to here in the chorus. We try to avoid this sound despite the order within it and focus on the now because it keeps life easier to live by. Now, pairing this back to the music, I find really interesting because I mentioned it was a melancholic track, but there's not really melancholy in here. We do have a possible crumbling mental health from the beginning, but now that I've reread that, I wonder if it isn't something else about our body crumbling. Not all at once, but little by little, eventually we will die of old age. Our bodies are not designed to live for centuries. We've got a handful of good decades in our lives, and then assuming we don't succumb to something else, an accident or infection or anything, natural causes, old age. Crumbling apart is no good for us. This is the truth that we will not absorb, that our body is not secure. Our bodies are not perfect. They're not going to stay the way they are forever. Sometimes it's hard to grasp that. I suppose it's what it's trying to say. Again, though, nothing really melancholic in here. A type of sadness, sure. Fear at times, maybe. But I found the music to be a bit more sorrowful. I compared it to grief through most of the analysis of it, and there's not really much grief in here. Fear of the unknown, sure, and a want to block out those thoughts. There is weight to that. There is a loneliness. I'm not sure if the chords themselves, though, really sold me on what was being explored here. But these are just my thoughts on A Caution to the Birds by the Frames. What did you think of this? Did you enjoy it? Did you find that the feelings you felt listening to it do match up with the lyrics? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this? Let me know. Drop all of that as well as anything else you'd like to into the comment section below. Above that in the description box is a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.